The CBC Television News. From the worldwide facilities of the CBC, film stories and the latest news reports. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gordon Ingalls bringing you first the headlines. Vancouver's second bank holdup in 4 days has netted $3,000. The last major draft of Canadian troops has arrived home from Korea, and 3 men have died in a helicopter crash in the interior.
CBC Television News. Good evening, this is Bob Switzer. First, the headlines. There was more rattling of swords today as the Suez crisis continues unabated. Floods are causing a serious loss of life and property damage in the eastern United States. And now the details.
The National with Peter Kent.
Good evening.
The National with Knowlton Nash. The National with George McLean.
Good evening.
10 p.m. Monday, January 11th. Tonight on The National, the big freeze. Canadians are freezing from east to west.
Now at 10 o'clock, we get the news and a glossy...
And tonight on The Journal, Jean Chrétien, will he run for the Liberal leadership, and can he succeed?
Like I am a real frog, and I'm proud of it.
Jean Chrétien, a documentary profile. The National with Knowlton Nash.
Good evening and welcome to our new hour.
Wednesday, December 19th. Tonight, on The National, none for the road. Ottawa plans new penalties for drinking drivers. Spying on the Soviets. The U.S. government blames the media for making details public. And on The Journal, second thoughts about social welfare. Old age security and baby bonus called into question. The debate over taxing back the monthly checks. The National with Knowlton Nash.
Good evening.
Monday, February 24th. Tonight on The National, Ottawa slashes cod quotas on the East Coast. GM cuts 2,000 jobs in Ontario. And on The Journal, the mysterious baby deaths at Toronto's Sick Children's Hospital. After a decade, questions linger. Tonight, an interview with Susan Nellis. The National with Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening. The writing was on the wall.
We've lost one life there so far, and I think it's just sheer luck that we have not lost other lives.
Tonight, the fear of living dangerously. Is Bosnia's war worth dying for? The peacekeeping dilemma. An exclusive report. The final push.
Who do we trust with our country?
All the president's men. 4 more years or 1 more day.
All right. She did a lot of damage.
The new California. A state of despair. CBC Primetime News with Peter Mansbridge and Pamela Wallen.
Good evening and welcome to this new hour of Canadian television journalism. And Pam, it's good to have you here.
It's good to be here, Peter. And we begin tonight with the frantic last-minute dash to the end of the American election campaign.
Tonight, the unity debate returns to Parliament. The Trade Center bombers get 240 years each, trying to save the orphans of Rwanda. And on our magazine, celebrating a medical milestone.
Polio turns communities into ghost towns as death strikes.
Is there some way of protecting against paralytic polio by immunization?
How American and Canadian researchers beat the polio plague, conquering the crippler, a documentary with Susan Reisler. BBC Primetime News with Pamela Wallen and Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening. The House of Commons got back to business with a bang today.
From CBC News.
Tonight, dead heat in Israel. Labor and Likud neck and neck. The Mounties move in. The raid on the Mayors Dubai. Charles and Diana on friendlier terms.
And on our magazine, the referendum on Mideast peace. Which vision will prevail? Staying on the fast track or slowing down? Israel's difficult choice and the uncertain outcome. And he won, but just.
Boy, was that close or what?
Glenn Clark and the NDP got a slimmed-down majority and a mixed message on deficits, taxes, and social programs. So what is the mandate for the 39% premier?
The National with Hannah Gartner and Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening. He presented himself as the peace candidate.
From CBC News.
Tonight, high drama.
How you doing? Much better.
A Christmas Eve rescue on Whistler Mountain. Dollar dilemma.
Forget the American holiday. Forget the Caribbean.
Snowbirds reconsider as the loony heads south. And tending the flock. The shepherds of Bethlehem in a modern world.
And on the magazine, Mother Teresa. She saw the world suffering and could not look away.
This is what Jesus came to teach us, how to love one another.
An exclusive documentary, the life and work of Mother Teresa, the saint of the slums.
The National with Hannah Gartner and Eric Sorensen.
Good evening. Christmas has come early.
Tonight, scorched earth.
Just a fire waiting to happen. Soybeans and particularly corn has been devastated.
From tinder dry forests to parched farmers' fields, is drought taking hold across the land? On track. The World Amateur Games begin in Edmonton, but how many Canadians will end up on the podium?
We have demonstrated our commitment as provinces to health care. What we're simply now asking the federal government, it's time for you to demonstrate your commitment.
Plus, Eric Sorensen with a wrap-up of the Premier's Conference. Linda Calvert with an update on the identity of Newfoundland's mysterious sea beast. And Terry Malewski on the new walls around the ancient city of Jericho.
The National. From the Canadian Broadcasting Centre, here is Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening. Well, we are now in the heart of... Tonight, election turnover. The Liberals defeat the PQ and take power in Quebec. game over.
Tikrit now belongs to the Iraqi people again, no longer to Saddam.
Coalition troops roll into Saddam Hussein's hometown. The glow of victory. Mike Weir talks about his historic win at the Masters. And cold case.
They didn't treat it like a homicide. It's just like another Indian dying.
3 years after this man froze to death in Saskatoon, troubling questions remain.
This is not an isolated incident.
A CBC News investigation.
The National. From the Canadian Broadcasting Centre, here is Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening. A red Liberal tide.
Tonight, accident report.
The van would not have passed a motor vehicle inspection in its pre-collision state.
Faulty brakes, worn tires. What was wrong with a vehicle that crashed, killing 7 high schoolers and a teacher? Breakdown.
We could see that something had definitely changed.
A massive chunk of Arctic ice falls off. What does this tell us about Canada's north? California shaken.
In California, we have to be prepared for anything and everything.
The Golden State takes a jolt. Is it a wake-up call? And the Book of Negroes.
Jack Hyde, he's age 50.
A haunting true story, an award-winning novel.
You're the winner this year.
I am.
Meet author Lawrence Hill.
The National. Here is Wendy Mesley.
Good evening.
It really made me feel like this isn't a democracy.
Are you feeling shut out of this election campaign? Good evening, I'm Peter Mansbridge, and this is The National. Some voters complain the Conservatives are turning them away.
Every Canadian should be worried about that. You're in a very un-Canadian place.
But can they turn controversy into opportunity?
We get more people coming up to our events combined than all the other parties combined.
And on the insiders, the polls that really count in a campaign, the polls you never see. Jamie and David tell us all about it. Police in New York search for a serial killer after they find several bodies. And want to put some spring in your step? We'll share the latest science about the run that's right for you. The story from the Conservative.
Good evening, I'm Heather Hiscox, and this is The National. Terrorism charges laid in yesterday's attack. New details about the suspect and the U.S. immigration policy the president says is to blame.
Diversity lottery sounds nice, it's not nice.
A devastating crash on one of Ontario's busiest highways.
I can't believe what I see.
What it could mean to the future of trucking. There's something new at Canadian grocery stores. Allegations of price fixing in the bread aisle. Plus, a dying language is in the spotlight. We're on set for the making of the first feature film entirely in Haida. Questioned by U.S. authorities in his hospital bed.
It's Thursday, March 1st, and this is The National.
Tonight, Vladimir Putin threatens the West with what he calls an invincible nuclear weapon. Just how much should the world worry?
Mountain Equipment Co-op drops brands linked to American gun makers. Could other Canadian retailers follow suit?
Donald Trump threatens a trade war over steel, what it could mean for Canada. And Chantal, Andrew, and Althea on the dinner invitation that haunts the Prime Minister.
Vladimir Putin has made no secret he wants Russia to return as a superpower. And in Moscow today, on this Sunday night, the loss of life is staggering even to veteran investigators. 20 people killed in a single tragic crash. It was supposed to be a celebration. They even rented a limo so no one drove drunk. So how did a day out in New York State
and with the most deadly accident in the U.S. in 9 years. Also tonight, an outspoken columnist enters a Saudi consulate and then vanishes. Was he murdered? And with Brett Kavanaugh on the court and Americans deeply divided, we look at what comes next. The first cases he will face, what his controversial confirmation means for the midterms. This is The National. At a time when people on both sides of the border are in the middle of a long weekend, out with friends or family, taking in the fall colors. On this Wednesday night, and so it begins. The long lines, bare shelves, and head-scratching questions of day one of pot legalization.
How did you choose your selection?
I went for one of everything.
But what happens now?
Their daughters were killed by Paul Bernardo, and they came to his parole hearing to try to make sure he stayed behind bars.
He is a psychopath.
His bid for parole was such a long shot, some are asking, what's the point?
And in-depth fake news and the U.S. midterms.
It's so easy to hit that share button, but really we all need to slow down.
Think the problems of the 2016 election are fixed? Think again. This is The National.
After years of study, fierce debate, and a relentless campaign of public persuasion, Canadians are now free to enjoy legal cannabis from coast to coast to coast, but not, of course, without some strict conditions.
Tonight, the search for answers after a deadly shooting at an American naval base.
We are looking very hard at uncovering his motive.
New details about the gunman and why the FBI presumes this was an act of terror. A fire tears through a factory in India, trapping workers inside.
Of course. Oh, well, gee.
Remembering the man who gave life to Sesame Street's most iconic characters.
We've got 150 kilometers of range left. We don't need to stop. We're gonna keep going. Bye.
And putting electric vehicles to the test. We're back on the road in our new series. This is The National. The details become more troubling by the day. Friday's mass shooting in Florida was already shocking because it happened on what should have been a secure military base.